Captain Thomas Harper strapped himself into the unfamiliar cockpit of a Japanese A-6M0 fighter. The engine's radial hum filled the air around him at Henderson Field on August 4th, 1943. He knew this secret flight, deep into enemy territory, was considered lunacy by many. Yet over the next 4 months, this audacious endeavor would reshape Allied intelligence. The pilot was found dead, but the Japanese fighter itself was largely intact. The story of this unusual aircraft began just weeks earlier on July 11, 1943. A Japanese Zero, damaged by ground fire, made an emergency landing on a beach. American Marines swiftly secured the site, preventing its destruction by enemy forces. By July 13th, the Zero had been transported to Henderson Field for examination. Mechanics began a meticulous examination, finding 3 rifle rounds. These had pierced the Nakajima Sake engine's oil cooler, but the airframe remained structurally sound, controls functional and hydraulics operational. Parts were scavenged from other crashed Zeros found deep within the jungle. Engineers had the aircraft flight-ready by July 20th. 4 days later, a Marine test pilot took it skyward. The Zero lived up to its formidable reputation with incredible turn rate and responsive controls. It could reach 331 miles per hour, climbing to 20,000 feet in less than 8 minutes. It outperformed the American F-4F Wildcats in nearly every aspect of flight. Only diving speed and armor protection were superior on the Wildcat. The test flights drew significant attention from onlookers. Command insisted the Zero was for technical analysis only. It was destined for the War Department stateside once evaluation concluded. No operational use was considered for the captured aircraft. Among the onlookers was Captain Thomas Harper, a 28-year-old former crop duster. From Oklahoma, he was credited with 14 aerial victories in his Wildcat. He intimately understood how the Zero moved and how it fought. Watching it from the ground offered a new perspective, revealing its full flight envelope. The knife-edge turns, high alpha climbs, and tight maneuvers made the Wildcat seem cumbersome. An audacious idea began to form in Harper's mind. The Solomon Islands campaign suffered from a critical intelligence deficit. Japanese positions, supply routes, and hidden airstrips were shrouded beneath dense jungle canopy. These evaded detection by high-altitude photography from Allied aircraft. Low-level reconnaissance by American aircraft invariably drew intense anti-aircraft fire, leading to unacceptable losses. But a Zero, he reasoned, flying low over Japanese positions might pass unnoticed. It would simply be assumed to be one of their own. On July 27th, Harper presented his concept to his squadron commander, Raymond Blake. The response was an immediate and emphatic refusal from Blake. Blake cited regulations against using captured enemy aircraft in combat operations. He highlighted severe risks, friendly fire, and inevitable detection by Japanese pilots. Undeterred, Harper pressed his case, speaking of his youth spent crop dusting. He had flown any aircraft his father's business. Harper Agricultural Aviation could get airborne. He argued his thousands of hours in varied aircraft. This meant he could adapt to the Zero's unique characteristics. Blake remained unconvinced, yet Harper did not abandon his conviction. He began an intensive self-directed study of Japanese radio procedures. Harper learned essential phrases like Tatadaima Kichi and Techi Haken. He also familiarized himself with the Zero's cockpit and its left-hand throttle. Japanese instrument labels and mixture control were also learned. Harper was confident that the fundamental controls were universal. By August 1st, Harper presented his proposal once more to the intelligence section. He offered to fly just one experimental reconnaissance mission north of Henderson Field. If successful, they could continue. If shot down, the program would end. Intelligence officers were desperate for low-level detail on troop concentrations. Supply routes and airfield construction intrigued them greatly. Their colonel raised the vital question of friendly fire, a significant concern. Harper proposed a solution. quickly detachable identification panels with bold white stripes. These bolted onto the Zero for transit through American airspace. They were released into the ocean before entering Japanese territory. The 6-minute flight time between American and Japanese lines was sufficient. He argued this was sufficient to jettison the 4 panels safely. 3 days later, Higher Command granted approval for a single experimental mission. Harper spent August 2nd and 3rd meticulously preparing for his mission. Mechanics installed a simple camera mount in the cockpit for a handheld K-20. Harper would operate this K-20 camera manually. Maintenance painted the distinctive white-striped ID panels designed for quick release. By the morning of August 4th, everything was ready for takeoff. At 5:30 a.m., Harper received his final briefing for the mission. Takeoff was scheduled for 6:15 a.m., his route taking him north along the coast. He would then go inland over Japanese territory to photograph positions. At 6:15 a.m., the Nakajima Sake engine rumbled to life. Harper taxied past anxious mechanics and skeptical intelligence officers. At 6:18 a.m., the Zero lifted off the runway, climbing with surprising agility. He quickly reached 8,000 feet with the removable ID panels clearly visible. These were seen by ground observers and American fighters below. No one fired as Harper reached the boundary of American and Japanese territory. He descended to 2,000 feet, slowed to 180 miles per hour, and pulled the quick-release latches. The fuselage panels fell away, followed by the wing panels splashing into the ocean below. In an instant, Harper was no longer an American pilot in a captured enemy fighter. He was simply another Zero, seemingly on patrol over Japanese-controlled skies. He adjusted his heading and turned inland towards his targets. At 6:35 a.m., he flew over a Japanese supply depot, capturing 4 photos. 7 minutes later, he spotted an airfield under construction with bulldozers. He photographed it from 3 angles as 2 Japanese Zeros appeared. Harper's instinct, honed by 14 kills, was to engage the enemy aircraft. But this critical mission was not about combat. He maintained his course, and the Japanese pilots, assuming he was friendly, never looked up. By 7:08 a.m., Harper had completed his reconnaissance loop, photographing 7 positions. Now the challenge was getting home without the ID panels. He made a swift decision. Approach Henderson Field from the west and radio ahead. At 7:20 a.m., he made contact with Henderson Tower. He reported, "This is Harper and captured Zero, do not engage." The tower acknowledged, broadcasting his position to all American fighters. At 7:28 a.m., he re-entered American airspace, an F-4F Wildcat patrol spotting him. Having received the warning, the Wildcats held fire and escorted him. Harper landed at 7:35 a.m., a mere 77 minutes after takeoff. Intelligence officers immediately greeted him, eager for the K-20 camera. Within 2 hours, the film was developed, revealing 7 previously unknown Japanese positions. Precise coordinates of a supply depot and a new airfield were found. Troop concentrations and defensive installations were also identified. Harper's low-level photographs provided unprecedented detail that high-altitude cameras had missed. The colonel asked if he could repeat the feat, recognizing its value. Harper, now confident, agreed, proposing he carry the ID panels in the cockpit. His second mission flew on August 7th, with panels retrieved mid-flight over water. It was another success, yielding 8 new intelligence targets. By August 15th, Harper completed 7 reconnaissance missions in the captured Zero. Each added vital pieces to the Allied intelligence puzzle, directly informing offensive operations. Pilots began to whisper about how Harper could penetrate deep into enemy territory. He did so without being shot down, a perplexing feat. The answer was deceptively simple. He looked like he belonged. His Zero bore authentic markings, and his flight patterns matched Japanese tactics. His radio communications were minimal, limited to memorized Japanese phrases. Japanese pilots saw a zero and presumed it was one of their own. By the time any suspicion might have arisen, Harper was already gone. The missions continued through September and October, becoming a critical covert routine. Early morning flights, low-level photography, in and out before Japanese controllers comprehended the anomaly. He photographed Japanese positions across Kolombangara, Vella La Vella, Chosul, and Bougainville. His contribution significantly shaped Allied planning for the entire Solomon Islands campaign. The risks, however, were constant. Japanese anti-aircraft fire and misunderstandings. American fighters and mechanical failure from captured parts were also a threat. On September 23rd, deep within Japanese territory, his engine began losing oil pressure. Normally, this would mandate an immediate return to base, but landing a captured zero on enemy ground was unthinkable. Harper pressed on, completing his photography, then racing for American lines. He reached Henderson Field with oil spraying across his windscreen, landing just as the engine seized. Mechanics rebuilt it using parts from another crashed Zero, and Harper was back in air. By November, Captain Harper completed an astounding 67 reconnaissance missions. He logged 143 hours in the captured Zero, taking over 2,000 photographs. This intelligence directly supported successful Allied operations, guiding artillery strikes on depots, airstrikes on newly discovered airfields, and infantry assaults on mapped positions were guided. On November 18th, Command made the difficult decision to end the program. The risks had become too severe, with radio intercepts suggesting Japanese suspicion. The potential loss of Harper and the captured aircraft was too great a strategic risk. Harper flew his final mission in the Zero on November 17th, photographing Bougainville positions. The Zero was retired from operational use, shipped to the United States for analysis. Harper returned to flying F-4F Wildcats, then F-6F Hellcats, ending the war with 23 confirmed kills. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his extraordinary reconnaissance operations. His Zero missions remained classified, omitted from citation until 1968. After the war, Harper returned to Oklahoma in 1946, leaving the battlefield behind. He took over his father's crop dusting business, flying until 1978. He rarely spoke of his time in the Zero, keeping the secret. When asked about his DFC, he would simply say he'd done some photography during the war. It was not until 1972 when a military historian uncovered references. This research concerned Solomon Islands intelligence operations and the captured Zero program. That is when Harper's remarkable actions fully came to light. The historian tracked him down, still running Harper Agricultural Aviation. Harper confirmed the details of his 67 missions, yet humbly downplayed his role. He insisted the Zero was easy to fly, crediting mechanics and intelligence officers. When asked what he thought about flying alone in a captured fighter, Harper drew a parallel. He said crop dusting, low-level flying over hostile terrain, finding targets, completing the job, getting home. Same principles, different aircraft. He passed away in 1994 at age 79. His obituary mentioned his crop dusting career and military service, but it omitted the captured Zero or his 67 missions from the public record. In U.S. military intelligence training, Harper's operations remain a quiet testament. The most effective reconnaissance platform is the one the enemy never suspects. This truth was embodied by an Oklahoma crop duster who changed the course of the Solomon Islands campaign.